Think of the Roman Empire, what usually comes to mind are powerful legions, great commanders, and epic battles. It often creates the impression that everything was achieved through courage, discipline, and military success alone. However, there was another side to the story that is discussed far less often: economics. Because no matter how powerful an army may be, maintaining it requires substantial financial resources. Thousands of soldiers must be fed, armed, and paid. Horses need fodder. Roads must be built, fortifications constructed, and siege engines manufactured. In short, war comes with a cost. In many ways, the story of Rome is also the story of how it managed to pay that cost. During the early years of the Republic, the system was relatively simple. Land-owning citizens could be called upon to serve in the military when needed, fight in campaigns, and then return to their farms. But as Rome expanded, its wars became longer and more distant. Short-term campaigns were no longer enough. The need for professional soldiers emerged. At this stage, the state began to take responsibility for financing the army. Soldiers were paid wages, and the needs of the military were increasingly met through centralized administration. But this is where the most interesting part begins. Over time, Rome came to view conquest not only as a military achievement, but also as a source of revenue. Every newly acquired territory meant new taxes, new resources, new mines, and new streams of income. In other words, wars helped finance future wars. For a time, this cycle worked remarkably well. However, major wars were extremely expensive, especially during the long and exhausting conflicts with Carthage. The state was forced to borrow from wealthy social classes. These loans were rarely acts of pure sacrifice. People expected something in return. They gained the right to conduct business in newly acquired territories, received tax collection privileges, and enjoyed various economic advantages. As a result, war ceased to be merely a political or military matter. It also became an economic enterprise. Over time, this transformed the structure of Roman society. Some military commanders accumulated greater power. Certain wealthy groups became increasingly intertwined with the state, and the profits generated by warfare became concentrated among particular segments of society. Yet every system has its limits. As long as Rome continued to expand, revenues kept flowing. But when conquests slowed and expenses continued to rise, the state was forced to search for new solutions. One of those solutions was currency debasement. At first, the effects were not immediately obvious. Over time, however, the consequences became significant. The proportion of precious metal in Roman coins was reduced, allowing more currency to be produced. But this gradually weakened public confidence in the money and contributed to inflation. The wealthy generally found ways to protect their fortunes. They purchased land and diversified their assets. For ordinary people, however, doing the same was far more difficult. Taxes increased, purchasing power declined, and economic pressure steadily intensified. Of course, it would be inaccurate to attribute Rome's decline solely to these factors. Political crises, civil wars, foreign invasions, and many other forces also played important roles. Nevertheless, it is difficult to deny that economic problems were a significant part of the story. This is precisely why the story of Rome remains fascinating today. People naturally draw parallels with the modern world: government debt, budget deficits, military spending, inflation, and economic inequality continue to dominate public debate. History does not repeat itself in exactly the same way. Yet similar patterns can emerge from time to time. Perhaps the most important lesson Rome leaves us is this: no matter how powerful a system may appear, it cannot sustain that power indefinitely once its economic foundations begin to weaken. For that reason, studying history is not only about understanding the past, it is also a way of better understanding the present